Hey guys, we are here on another episode of I Follow for Kids. Hey, if you haven't got an I Follow for Kids box yet, make sure that you reach out to us. We would love to send you one. We've only got a few left, and we would love to send those out. We want every single one to be used. It's fun for the whole family. It's got tons of activities in it. So let us know if you guys need one. On today's episode of I Follow for Kids, we are going on a long drive to a little Sweden. Now, I know Sweden's another country, but I promise you we can drive there today. So why don't you guys follow along as we head off on another I Follow adventure. Let's go. Well, here we are, all the way in Sweden, sort of. Okay, it's actually called Little Sweden, and it's a town called Lindsborg, Kansas. It's only about an hour away from Wichita, and me and my family came down here. We had some fun going around Lindsborg, Kansas, learning a little bit about what they call Little Sweden, USA. What's interesting is you actually learn quite a bit about Sweden, right? I mean, when you go down Lindsborg, downtown, the main street, you'll see all these painted horses that are called dollas, and dollas are kind of interesting. They're painted horses that came out of a part of Sweden called Dalarna, and what's interesting about that is it's actually become kind of this symbol for Sweden all over the world. Now, why do I know that? Well, I know that because I spent some time in Little Sweden. I spent some time in Lindsborg, Kansas. You know, there's a really cool verse in the Bible. It comes out of 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. And when we're talking about what it means to testify, remember how we're talking about what it means to follow Jesus? Last week we spent some time talking about how one of the ways we can testify that we're a follower of Jesus is by being baptized. But that's not the only way that we can testify or tell others about Jesus. In 2 Corinthians, Paul says that we are ambassadors of Christ. What's an ambassador? Well, an ambassador is somebody that represents another country and lives in a country that's not their home. So for instance, our Swedish ambassador to the U.S. might tell us about Lindsborg, Kansas, or they might tell us about the Dala. They might tell us about what life is like in Sweden, and it'd be interesting to learn from them. Now, we don't have an ambassador, but Lindsborg, Kansas is kind of like that, isn't it? When we came here, we learned about Sweden because they call themselves Little Sweden, USA. That's what an ambassador is. When we are ambassadors for Jesus, what that means is we tell other people what it's like to live for Jesus, what it's like to follow Jesus. And remember how he said following Jesus is an adventure. You'll be surprised at the fun places God will take you. It's not always easy, but it is always worth it to follow Jesus. When we testify, in fact, if you go back to that verse in 2 Corinthians, Paul tells the Corinthians that God is actually making his appeal to the world we live in through us. Isn't that cool to think about? I got to tell you, I've never learned more about Sweden than when the time I spent in Little Sweden, USA. We had a lot of fun. But how cool is it that sometimes the best way people will learn about God and about Jesus is the way that you live like Jesus and follow him. In fact, Paul says in 2 Corinthians that God is making his appeal through us. He's saying, please come back to God. When we tell the world that we live in, hey, following Jesus is so worth it, that is testifying. So practically, what does that mean? Well, it means you can just tell your story. You know, sometimes I think people are afraid that if they talk about God or Jesus, they won't know all the answers. That's okay. Just tell your story. People might not agree with you, but they can't disagree with your story. Or maybe for you, a great way to tell others about Jesus is simply by inviting them to come to KidzWorld. Tell them to check it out online on YouTube, or tell them to come in person if they're comfortable with that. You can find how you can testify to others about how good it is to follow Jesus. And that is the second part of I Testify.